go visit Active Network, Capital One, Tonic 3 in room 2037. Anyway, without further ado, I do want to introduce Rahel and Bailie. That is our opening keynote speaker. You guys know her and love her. We've had her here before. We're glad to have her back. Ladies and gentlemen, Rahel and Bailie.
So, y'all right?
Yeah.
Y'all right? Okay, y'all right is the British greeting for good morning. The first month that I lived in the UK, I wondered if I was dressed funny, and that's why people were asking me if I was all right. So, conferences, jet lag, not enough sleep, sensory overload. But I want to say that despite all that, it's a great day to be in Dallas. And it's a great day to be in Dallas because of big design. I think this is one of my favorite conferences. And I want to thank Brian and Adam and the organizers for having me here this year. I couldn't be here last year, and I'm glad that they asked me back. Keith for the brilliant playlist. I don't know how many of you were here this morning listening to it. It's all about communication and information. And Josh, who was made it his mandate to tell me bad puns at least a couple of times a day. And the volunteers, particularly Sibylla, who took me around shopping when my suitcase didn't arrive, and to Jay Neal, who's making me look good on the video this morning. And thanks to Jeff, the keynote speaker from yesterday, and Russ Unger. I still want you to sign my book. And Rob Garner as well for setting the stage for what I'm going to talk about this morning. And so, another British expression, I'm right chuffed to be here. So this presentation is about how we deal with content in the age of social media, where content converges and disperses, and we have ever-increasing challenges to get the right people to engage with the right message at the right time, and so on. I could keep going in the right channel, in the right language, in the right version, but you get the picture. And why is this not advancing? Okay, I'm going to have to stick close to the podium. As many of you may have gathered from the name of the presentation, I borrowed it from the umbrella from, I borrowed it from the Verizon ad, which is, can you hear me now? And what we do, the umbrella for what we do, isn't actually create content. What we're doing is we're creating trust. And so when you hear this, the Verizon man, the Verizon tester that goes out and takes a mobile phone into all these adverse conditions to see if the signal works, I thought it was a good symbol for this presentation because, like the Verizon tester, we can't send up a trial balloon and just ask, do you trust me now? And then check done off of a list. And what we have to do is we have to test and test again because we're operating in an environment where things change all the time. And so we're continually challenged to test and test. And you can say this month, do you trust me now? And the answer could be yes, but as you can see here, where Verizon, turns out that they've been giving some information to the NSA. So this month, do you trust me now? So before we go too deep into the issue of trust, I'd like to go on a little diversionary trip, if you will, to look at some of the factors that go into trust. So how many of you do this? Before you do something like look for an address or back into a parking space, you turn down the radio. Oh yeah, I see a number of hands. So a friend posted this on Facebook and said, I thought I was the only one who did that. But in reality, we all do a version of that, particularly as we get older. Why? Well, it turns out that certain functions happen in the same part of the brain, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But that's why you can chew gum and drive, but you can't talk and drive, or text and drive. That's why you can drive and listen to the radio, but you need to turn it down when you park. So personally, when I work, I can't have music on, but I can have the television on in the background. And I always wondered about that. But ironically, sometimes I'll be watching that for hours because I'm not actually watching. This is what I discover when I take the mental break. And it turns out that that background noise did serve a purpose. What it did was help me focus. Counterintuitive. So we as humans are continually taking in huge streams of data from each of our senses. And it seems that the brain doesn't have enough capacity to process all the incoming information. So researchers have said that they found that some neurons in the prefrontal cortex have the ability to suppress the information that you're not interested in. They're like filters. So our brains have this seemingly magical ability to focus on only the signals that we feel are important, things that we want to take in. Makes sense, because without being able to filter, we would suffer from such sensory overload with all the stimuli that's constantly battling for our attention. Look, squirrel! Right? And in a time where there's an incredible amount of content being uploaded to the internet every single minute of every single day, focus can be a very good thing. So synaptic connections are where the nerve cells meet. They allow us to sharpen the precision of the signals and selectively boost the transmission of attention-grabbing information while suppressing or reducing the level of noise or attention-disrupting information. And this brain mechanism, which helps your attention shape perception, all happens through gamma rays. Gamma waves. That's a sci-fi conference next door. Okay. So isn't it nice to know that there's some science behind why people ignore your content? Because when you're confronted with visual stimulation like this, you have to have a mechanism to filter out what you don't need so that you can pay attention to what you do need. This is another situation, and I would challenge you that this is even worse because it's actually harder to focus on because you have to sort through each sign to see if it's something you need to know, all the while driving and paying attention to the road. Sound familiar? So maybe this is like some of the communication we create. So it seems that information is carried on top of gamma waves, just like songs are carried on top of radio waves. So these carrier waves transmit information from one region of the brain to another. And researchers found that there are slow gamma waves and there are fast gamma waves. And they're coming from different brain areas, just like radio stations transmit on different frequencies. So the brain cells can rapidly switch between tuning into slow waves or fast waves. But what they can't do is listen to both exactly at the same time. That's a little bit like listening to the radio in between two stations. All you hear is noise, between the frequencies. So if you want to not have this garbled noise sound, you have to tune in either to slow or fast. So one scientist said, when you feel like you really connect with somebody and you say you're on the same wavelength? Well, when brain cells want to connect with each other, they synchronize their activity. So they literally tune in to the same wavelength, to each other's wavelength. So until recently, nobody really knew why the frequency of gamma waves differ so much from one region of the brain to another, and from one moment to the next, or what this meant for communication. But there's a theory, we call it the cocktail party effect. So the cocktail party effect is how people's brains filter out background voices to concentrate on the person they're trying to listen to. Which explains why calling someone's name over the chatter of other party guests is futile, not because they're tuning you out, but because they're tuned into something else. And I like that analogy of the cocktail party because it's a nice segue into another aspect of what we're discussing here. So at a cocktail party, way before you get to the stage where you're filtering someone out or filtering out the extraneous noise, there's another stage where you decide who you will even talk to. So you might walk into a party and you say, there's a group of work colleagues and they're going to be talking about kind of work stuff, okay, there's a group of my personal friends and they're going to have this other discussion over here, and oh my gosh, over by the bar there's my lovesick ex, and I don't know how that conversation is going to go, but it's probably not going to go well, so I'm just going to bypass the bar and go talk to that friend I see standing alone in the corner. And that is all about social judgment. It's that moment of, do I trust you now? Do I trust you to have a decent conversation with me? Do I trust myself, my own social judgment, to determine the right conversation to focus on? We can't put too much emphasis on filtering and the different ways that we use it to shape our social reality. So what do gamma waves and the prefrontal cortex and focus and filtering at cocktail parties and so on have to do with content and social media? So let's talk a little bit about social, let's talk a little bit about content, and then we'll loop it around to bring it all together. So social. So this is the audience participation portion of our program. So what do you think of when you think of social? Facebook. Raise your hands. Yeah? Oh, got a lot of hands. Twitter. Okay. And what about Twitter for B2B, Facebook for B2C? Yes, no? Yeah? So? Okay. What about all those other social channels? YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, Google+. What other channels does your organization use? Anything I haven't mentioned here? What about some of the older ways of communicating? Campaign sites with a social element to it. Forums, listservs. Any of you using some of those older channels? Yeah? No, you know, and there's a time and a place for all of them. It's not to say that everybody should be using Snapchat. Snapchat is a very specific demographic. So it just goes to show that we've always been social. We're just doing it more so now. And here's why social matters. People are hardwired to interact with each other. We have what they call a social brain. So one social neuroscientist made an interesting observation that our brains are wired in a way that we experience reward during mutually satisfying social interactions and sensations similar to physical pain when we're socially rejected or disapproved of. And that's whether it's online or in real life. So that's one of the important things to understand when developing our social strategy. People need at least some social interaction built into their transactions to feel good. And you might think, oh, this is all well and good, but what does that have to do with my business? Maybe you're thinking, oh, you know, we deal with the public and the channels we have are working for us, or we're in a B2B business, this has nothing to do with us. Or maybe you're thinking, our customers are engineers or software developers. They don't care about social media. Well, what I want to do is challenge those assumptions, because they are assumptions. And they're assumptions that we've accumulated and refined over the years. And we may have gone down our own path some time ago and never course corrected. So I believe that unless we're starting from a place of creating content that's meant for some sort of social validation, social interaction, or social proof, we're not doing our jobs right. So the first thing I would ask you is this: is your social really social? Here I've listed some of the more common content genres and then some channels into which we publish. So how many here would say that they're successfully doing things like multi-channel publishing? They're publishing into multiple channels. Not that many hands are going up. Can you raise your hands higher? Because I want to make sure okay, a few, okay. So how many of you would say that you create genre-specific content for each channel? Okay, that's good. How many of you would say you have an omni-channel approach to content? That is to say that you put the customer at the center, and then you ensure that the customer has all of the content that they need throughout the entire customer journey or customer lifecycle, right from vague interest to post-sales support. Okay, 2, 3 people. And how many of you are providing personalized content? Okay, a couple of people in the back. So, what does this mean for your level of social engagement in the bigger picture? We're going to talk about that a bit. And seeing as how, I'm actually surprised at how few hands went up, because I thought there would be 40 to 50%, but this should create some interest then. The bigger picture, I don't think, is actually with social media. In fact, I think there's a profound difference between doing social media and having a social business. So social media is only one aspect, if you will, of social business. Social media has too often become simply another output channel. You create posts and you post them. And sure, you know, you can line them up to kind of fire off at the scheduled intervals. But what you've done basically is create another publishing channel with genre-specific content. So, sir, what's your name? Okay, so while you're here, are you staying at the conference hotel?
No, I'm not.
You're not. Well, you know, it's too bad because they've got a great gym. Do you like gyms? You do? Well, you gotta go to the gym. You gotta go check out the gym because next time you come here, you know, you're gonna want to go to the gym. What about pools? Do you like swimming pools?
Yeah.
Well, they got a great pool. And what about the restaurant? Have you used the restaurant? You haven't? Well, they have great specials. You know, it's just, you have to try the restaurant. And what about the bar? Do you like to hang out at the bar? Well, they've got a great bar, and you know, there's a whole bunch of geeks here this week. You'll really like it. Don't really like it. Wow, that's a nice conversation. We should talk again tomorrow. So, let me ask you, since we had that little exchange, do you trust me better now? No. But isn't that like every interaction you have with a brand? Hi, you've been on my site 5 seconds. Take this survey. Hi, you want to answer these questions, or you want to give me your credit card information? I think we need to get to know each other a little better before I start giving you personal information. So, remember Marshall McLuhan? Oh yeah. The whole call and response nature of the internet? Well, that's social. It's not just the call out, but it's the response. When I talk to you and I see you nodding, then I know that you received the message and you're giving me feedback. That's the closed loop of communication. So if you're not doing that, you're not really doing social. You're not really invoking any sort of human response. And we have those social brains. And social engagement actually builds the volume of gray matter in the amygdala region of the brain. And so having social is actually building people's brains. It's a little frightening to me. So social business, on the other hand, is a state of mind, and it's an operational model. So social business is what happens in an organization that has matured and doesn't simply do social media, but actually has a social business strategy in place. It's an organization where staff are empowered and enabled to represent your brand, and they have a framework in which to do it. So that means everybody in the business is expected to be a brand ambassador. Not just the shiny people in your communications department. It means that the salespeople on the shop floor are brand ambassadors, right through to the people who are doing your post-sales support and your customer service reps. And it means that the content creators have to be brand ambassadors too. And I can hear your internal dialogue from up here. I don't have time for that. I'm too busy as it is just getting my deliverables out the door. And whether those are knowledge-based articles or tech docs or white papers or marketing material. And I'm not going to deny that those are very real pressures. So I have a client whose perspective is, faster, get stuff on the web faster. And faster isn't working. They need to come around to the conclusion that what they need is a little bit slower and a whole lot better. And smart organizations are starting to change their performance metrics to meet this new reality. This is a poster from Facebook that I had someone send me, that never pausing innovation machine. And they've just adopted the mantra of slow down and fix your shit. And that's quite telling. So another assumption I'm going to challenge is about the success measures for our social initiatives. Social seems to become about liking and following. How many posts or pins or whatever terminology you use can you share or get shared? How many likes did you get? There's this assumption that you want to share everything. But people aren't that one-dimensional. We're all learning to game the system, our readers included. So keeping up becomes a game in itself, which isn't particularly complimentary when it comes to engaging with a brand, when you stop to think about it. And even if someone genuinely does like you, some likes want to be private, as do some purchases and some pictures. Ask Jennifer Lawrence. I may want to follow a cancer survivors group without telling people outside my family. Or I might want to buy a bit of a naughty book without announcing it to my social network. Or I might want to job hunt in private. Or just to keep some photo memories to myself. In other words, as a consumer, I want control over my content. And I'm redefining what my content means. So a like is my content. And I want to have control over it, not the brand. And you might say, my content isn't just what I produce, but what I consume and the conversations that I engage with. So you might ask, do you trust me now? And my response may be, as a consumer, I'm going to make my world work for me. And that brings us to content. Because without content, there is no social. Social is what fuels, content is what fuels social. So that content could be generated by different parties at different times. It might take different forms, text, audio, video. I understand that soon we're going to have smell and touch as well as technology progresses, but it's all still content. So we create content to shape an experience. In fact, calling people users, I know this comes up over and over again in our industry about how we shouldn't call people users. We should recognize them as consumers of our content, but I would go a step further and say that we have an obligation to shift from consumers of content to consumers of content as part of the conversation. And we have an obligation to shift from last millennial shotgun approach of fire and forget marketing, and instead have the conversations that will prove to people who want control over their content that we can be trusted with it. That goes back to 1999 and the publication of the Food Trade Manifesto. How many of you remember that? Wow, there's a lot of very young people in this crowd. Yeah, a friend of mine said, I think I was only born 10 years before that. So I am so old. But they talked about, they're the first people, it was very revolutionary, that talk about closing the loop to communication and creating conversations. So what too many companies do is find a formula, and they're often not even finding their own formula. What they're doing is copying someone else's formula. And then they run with it. So my favorite right now is the hackathon. Let's hold a hackathon! Every marketing department wants to hold a hackathon. And I'm just waiting for the day that my hairdresser salon holds a hackathon. From the room. So the main concern that we should have is whether our content is fit for purpose. The term fit for purpose is very common in the UK, and I just love the term. So is it suitable for our particular audience? We saw how much content's uploaded to the internet every minute of the day. So is the content that we're providing what will engage our audience? Does that engagement promote trust? What should we be asking? Can we even ask, do you trust me now? Then there's the delivery of the content. And yes, I was going to talk about it because I talk about it all the time. Because if you don't think about the content lifecycle and the customer lifecycle and then tailor your strategy to fit them and have an underlying infrastructure that will help you deliver the content, you're going to have a problem, a big problem. And we know that some groups, and I'm not naming any names, but you know who you are, would like to stay blissfully oblivious of all these things. So let's start with an easy delivery mechanism that you have to think about, devices. Devices are becoming an increasingly important factor in delivering and sharing content. There's the whole issue of what to deliver on what device and what it looks like. And that's being figured out through things like responsive design and adaptive content, and for the most part, that's part of the larger user experience. And then there's cross-device synchronization. Cloud-based services such as Facebook are examples of pretty reliable cross-device synchronization. But think of something like Skype, which is just a nightmare for me. People will ping me, I don't get their messages because I have to open Skype on the iPad instead of on the laptop. Now when I'm locked out, I'm locked out of all my devices. Anybody here work for Microsoft? Can we talk after this? I really have some Skype challenges. Today, in this year, we're at the point where we don't trust software that doesn't deliver or synchronize our content properly. And it's not just us who gets to decide what property means. If we think of even rather benign apps like Evernote or OneNote, there's a sharing component. And they also have to figure out their social components. Sharing is good only when you can control how much is shared and with whom. We want good control over our content, reliable interfaces that we can trust. And if you've ever had a scare with auto backup to Google, that's just not trust-inspiring. The next issue, platform. We have platform relevancy issues. Or if I reframe that, we have platform neutrality issues. The larger companies are busy creating walled gardens, while the average consumer just wants things to work. They want more interoperability. Should it matter if you want to chat with someone, whether they have an iPhone, an Android phone, a Windows phone, or some other phone that's popular somewhere else in the world? You probably don't. You probably just want it to work. And let's not forget the current biggie, personalization. I'll discuss this some more in a few minutes, but do we have the delivery infrastructure in place to make sure that your customers get relevant messages for you? It won't inspire trust if you're asking people to upgrade products that they don't own, or if you're giving them a sales pitch when what they need is technical support. What your response what do you think the response would be to "Do you trust me now" when you blatantly show that you're not listening? Also, the new kid on the block, ephemeral content. And we should talk about text messaging a bit because it's becoming more and more important as a communication tool. And I want to make perfectly clear, I am not advocating taking up texting as a tool to spam people with marketing fluff. But there is more and more communication being done by text. Alerts, for example. I, for one, love getting reminders from my dentist, my doctor, even my bank, to make my life easier. And so it gives me confidence in them as a brand that I engage with. I've been reading about how news is disseminated via text messages in countries where journalism is just too dangerous a business to be in. And I read an article about connecting youth with news through text alerts. And in places like Africa, where virtually everyone has a mobile phone, kids are being helped with homework through texting. And things like banking by phone. In Africa, it's the backbone of the mobile money market. The market's huge, topping out at over $60 billion in 2012. That's greater than the amount of money sent via mobile in Europe and North America combined. So text as a communication tool is not insignificant. For some organizations, moving to this kind of transitory content makes sense. So Charlie Southwell, who's a social media guy whose expertise I value, explained to me that Snapchat, so you know that app that started for sexting, it's now being used for ephemeral offers, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But the market's very fragmented. In China, there's WeChat, has 500 million users. In Europe, Viber is still quite strong, and WhatsApp seems to be everywhere. And that speaks to the move for Wi-Fi-enabled chat. And that shouldn't be ignored, whether it's Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or Google Hangouts. We have to figure out if and where it fits in with our social media mix. So texting as social content may become more prevalent. Betfair, which is a very popular UK gambling site, became a market leader because they're offering self-destructing odds to their customers away from the eyes of their competition. So this offer is shown for the few seconds that Snapchat allows, okay. And then it's gone. And that's one approach for a specific audience, because that audience that's about to bet on a horse race needs to have that offer within a few minutes of the start of the race, and then it's gone. So they have this kind of impetus to take up the offer, or it's irrelevant. And right now we think of something like Twitter as being relatively transitory, because if something hasn't been posted within the past few hours, you're likely to miss it on your feed, which has its upsides and downsides. If you're a marketer, you don't like it because it's gone off the screen. But if you're a customer service person dealing with a kind of a serious problem, you're kind of thankful when that negative feedback falls off the radar. But what if that's not your demographic? What if you're part of the B2B community, or in a more traditional field, or in a regulated industry? What if you're an e-commerce site and the overwhelming majority of your content is product content? So netnographers are showing that there's plenty of opportunity to build social components into your content. And actually on the plane here, I was reading something about Maersk and how they are leaders in the social media and social business. So let's look at some examples of companies who are creating conversations with their content consumers in a way that has real business impact. So Autodesk, pretty nerdy stuff, right? Well, they're building social into their technical documentation to provide quick, efficient, and effortless experience for both customer service and for pre-sales research. And they did a soft launch, and they had such spontaneous engagement that they exceeded their objectives within a very, very short period of time. And they have people who make a point of contributing to the community, because there's a little bit of gamification involved, so that they can be the top contributor that night. And so they find all sorts of ways that people are using their products that they had no clue about. And they found that you can use certain features in different ways, and that all this kind of happened because of their social engagement. The Naked Security blog, which is provided by Sophos, I think of it as more like a free-of-charge service with a mission of exchanging advice and best practices to keep people safe from computer security issues. Do I trust them? I do. I trust them so much that I follow them on Facebook. Bosch. did a presentation at CS Forum in 2014 where they looked at a few of their over 500 channels, many of them with a social component. And the interesting part is that in many of the channels, they don't even talk about their products. They're promoting kind of a state of mind and the trust that goes with that they're not going to photobomb their products into your enjoyment of the content that they provide. So it's a very interesting approach. And then there are some companies that haven't quite implemented so well. Zappos, the online shoe retailer, used to be the darling of social media. Well, it had some serious backlash over its move to hiring exclusively through its walled garden social network. So if you want to work at Zappos, you better be active in the Zappos social community. How exhausting is that? So what does this mean for us? Well, the social aspects that we need to consider has grown exponentially. Depending on who our audience is, we may use very different social channels to reach them. They're all examples of companies that are finding the right social building blocks that work for their audiences. So here's where theory meets practice in our professions. For a person to focus on what they need, they will have to filter out all the noise factors. And they're going to do that based on their own social needs. So let's go back a few years. First, people filtered out things like banner ads. Remember, we call that banner blindness. And then what did the marketers do? They put that same content into the right-hand column, into the right rail, and now people have developed right rail blindness. Because as part of our focus, we adopt a cognitive schema, a mental framework that helps organize our expectations. And on the one hand, it helps us take shortcuts when we encounter other situations that are very similar. So banner, we learn to ignore because every time we encounter a banner in that position, we know what it is, so we start to ignore it. On the other hand, it means that we also gloss over potentially useful information because we've learned to filter it out. And people doing usability studies will often say, yes, we put the contact information in the right-hand column and nobody saw it, and in our usability tests we see this over and over again. So moving content around the screen to push stuff in front of our faces that we don't want isn't really helpful. So now we get down to the brass tacks, the intersection of focus, social, and content, and that's trust. For me, this is really at the heart of the matter. The aspect of social and content, the focus and filtering, and all that stuff is nothing if you don't have trust. So we often talk about the scent of information. If the scent is strong, we trust our direction, we keep moving forward toward our destination. And when the scent is weak, we start to double back. The same goes for trust. I like to use the metaphor of a token. Each successful transaction with a brand means that a customer gives them a trust token. But each unsuccessful transaction means that you have to forfeit one or possibly more of those tokens. And it may be all of the tokens in one single unsuccessful trust-breaking moment. And just to keep things interesting, it turns out there's more than one kind of trust. So yes, there's soft trust, which is about the brand itself, and then there's hard trust about the underlying technology. I like the brand, I really don't trust the shopping cart. There's trust for transient interactions, and then there's trust for long-term relationships. And then we have to take into account the difference between rational or cognitive trust and emotional trust. So this graphic describes the trust journey. The top arrow shows that in the early stages of trust, people look at things like design professionalism to influence their engagement, which is kind of ironic because you hear about people getting scammed and then they'll say, the website looks so professional. But later on, people use a more detailed analysis to make trust decisions. The bottom arrow shows that at the same time, people will adopt kind of different stages. At the beginning, there's this intent to trust. Not quite there, but thinking about it. And then it turns into engaging in trust activities. I'm going to click this and see what happens. And if I trust what happened, then I will click again. And then the last stage is going into a trust relationship. So let's look at an example of who I think of as a poster child for how to do content in the age of social. It's the brand iFixit. How many of you know that brand? Oh, Good stuff. iFixit provides an entire product ecosystem and a social community, and they inspire trust all the time. So I think the key to their success is that they have a clear vision, the right to repair. They put it right on their homepage, and the way they operate is within that self-imposed mandate. So a little bit about their history. Two budding entrepreneurs had originally assumed that if they put up an e-commerce site that sold parts to fix your phones, particularly iPhones, well, build it and they shall come. And when that didn't pan out, they changed their business model. So they built a site that was meant for sharing, both for contributors and for content consumers. And in the process, they built some social components that benefit all their customers. So through the site, the community provides instructions on how to fix things. And the site's very upfront about the fact that the instructions are provided for free, and the sales of the parts and tools to complete the repairs is how they make the money and keep their site going. So Kyle Weens, who's one of the co-founders, describes their approach as advocacy-based marketing. And it's an important distinction that Fixit considers themselves advocates of repair, not advocates of their company. The company is simply the delivery mechanism to make repair happen. So iFixit encourages people not just to use the site to fix things, because they believe that repair is noble, which is also to say that that's part of their mission statement. They also encourage people to contribute instructions, and they call this a collaborative repair community. So they do have some social checks and balances factored in. For example, those who contribute more useful instructions earn more money than contributors who don't. And other content consumers decide what's useful to them, so it's kind of a self-correcting system. And the iFixit guys wanted the contributors to succeed as well, so they created a content standard called the O manual for when people contribute instructions to make it easier to submit your instructions, and it makes it consistent for the end user to be able to consume them. So by moving to a social business model, iFixit has become wildly successful. And despite their audience, who you might see as one of those don't care about social media audiences, they are using their social component quite well. And now they have other companies, such as the automotive sector, coming to them for help. So you could have, instead of getting that thick book in your glove compartment when you buy a car, you could go onto iFixit and it will tell you how to fix everything. Now, you can use social physics to analyze human behavior. You can use social engineering to develop a statistical model to predict and manipulate behavior. But if we look at recent social experiments, we see that our efforts can cause ill will when users of services discover that those experiments, and they feel a little manipulated, like lab rats. So Facebook, its experiment with tweaking the feeds to include more good news. Or OkCupid, with its experiment where they deliberately mismatched couples to see what would happen. Or Zappos with its experiment that we just talked about with making potential candidates be active on a social network to even be considered for a job. So here's the thing. If we want our customers to trust us, we have to inspire trust. We have to think of all the touch points in our omni-channel strategy, in our design strategy, our content strategy, to see if we inspire trust throughout the entire customer journey, from discovery and consideration right through to support and renewal. Because what we do in our professional lives, as content professionals, as UX professionals, as usability professionals, designers of interfaces, or designers of content, has the potential of being seen as manipulators of behavior. We like to think that we're the good guys, that what we're doing is a noble service. We're creating a good user experience, but not all of our customers see it that way. So if we take the customer issue of the day, say personalization, we need to ask ourselves, it's the issue of the day, but to what end? Is it for a better user experience or for more company profit? Because as professionals, we always have to balance those tensions between the two sets of values. There's the values of the consumer that may include things like personal privacy and data security, particularly when there's financial information involved. Or the values of the organization, whose loyalties are actually to the stakeholders such as shareholders or members, and whose values may include cost reduction of service delivery or extending the life of an aging infrastructure. So it's important that we examine all of our customer experience to ask whether we've earned their trust. For example, is our delivery channel, does it look professional? Is it trustworthy? Does the site work as anticipated? Is all the content accurate and up to date and compelling? Does the content and design meet expectations within the context that the content consumers bring? Do we exude competence in the content of the experience that they expect? So I think we need to ask ourselves, why should our content consumers trust us? And you notice that I didn't say, why should they stop trusting us? The question is, why should they start trusting us? And if they don't trust us, why would we expect them to engage with our brand? So there is no magic formula. There is no procedural guide. Instead, we have to create an ethos that makes itself known to our customers and other content consumers so they can read us with as much transparency as we read our friends and family. As content and design professionals, we've always prided ourselves on doing the right thing, and this is our opportunity to go out and do it. Thank you. And I wanted to say that I'm putting this up on SlideShare. It will be up there probably by the end of the day. And I did a lot of research for this presentation. And so what I'm doing is a series of blog posts, and you can find the first one on my site, Intentional Design. So we have about 5 minutes. Is it 5 minutes? We have 5 minutes for Q&A. Okay, don't do this to me, folks. Somebody ask a question. All right, well, okay.
Okay, so we were talking about the brands that don't exude, we all know the brands that don't exude confidence.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
We all know the brands that don't exude trust and confidence, you know, that's the brands that, but you know, besides Amazon, what are some brands that you think are prime examples of those that do exude that confidence?
So examples of brands that exude confidence. I think it's different for each person. Because the brands that I may engage with, other people may not engage with at all. So it's the telltale signs of what makes them trustworthy. And so having a good user experience is one of the key ones for me, because that means that they care enough to make sure that the brand is trustworthy. Some government agencies. So I worked on the City of Vancouver website, and we put a lot of effort into making government transparent. And that was a big piece of it, to say, we want people to know. We don't want people to be able to say, I didn't know about this, this is a surprise in my neighborhood. We want people to know what's happening, so we're going to build that in so that there is that transparency and we can encourage people to get involved and so on and so forth. So those are the kind of signs that you want to see from a brand. Yes?
Are there certain graphical elements that automatically convey trust at the start of the trust equation?
I don't think so. Well, the question was, are there some visual elements that automatically convey trust? And I don't think so, because even if I were to say this certain design aesthetic conveys trust, those things change. They're very transitory. So, you know, it might convey trust today, and next year that's passé. So it really is very.
So you see sites that like have the Better Business Bureau.
Oh yes. Oh, like
sites.
Better Business Bureau.
Do those really work, or?
So do they really work? The thing for me is that audiences are not monolithic. You know? So will they work for the relatively naive consumer? Possibly. Will they work for the more sophisticated user? Maybe not. This morning I overheard these two fellows talking about going to a secure site, so you automatically assume something about credentials, and they might make that distinction, somebody else might not make that distinction, my sister will make that distinction. So I think it really depends on your audience segment. Yes?
So what if you have a brand that over the years has lost some trust? What can we do besides completely redoing our interfaces and that sort of thing to try to repair that?
I'm going to rephrase this in a way that to have a sentence. So you're married and you cheat on your partner. What do you have to do to regain that trust? A lot, right? But it's not one thing.
Right.
It's like a whole bunch of stuff. And so the brand, it works the same way. It's like, it's part of a conversation and you have that trust relationship and it's broken. You're going to have to suck it up and do a lot of repair work to make that. And sometimes it may not work. Your partner may just say, sorry, that's so sad. Moving on.
So, there are artists out there that are like Twitter that say, hey, you completed 30% of your profile. Let's complete, 2 more pieces of information and you'll have 50% of your profile. Is there any research out there that says that kind of thing effective in let's say, encouraging the user to fill out optional pieces of the form?
As part of the research I did for this presentation, there was a lot of I read a lot about filling out profiles and kind of barriers to entry. And so there's no simple answer, but basically the more you ask them to fill out at certain times in the process, you will encounter barriers. So it's providing the opportunities at the right time to provide the information they need to go forward. So when I get to that blog post, I have something like 16 blog posts to do. So when we get to that one, read up on it.
I have a simple question. You had a graph with YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram as the winners. What were the X and Y axis?
I'd have to go back and look because I don't remember offhand, but I'll get that to you. Yes?
You mentioned earlier kind of a balance between making money versus catering to a good user experience. And I kind of have to wonder is, do you think that maybe a lot of, especially bigger businesses, are putting a little too much focus on making money versus actually providing good experience, especially when it comes to social media?
Oh, yeah. So the question was, in the balance between making money and providing good user experiences, are there companies that are too focused on making money at the expense of customer experience? I would say yes, the majority of them. And the reason I say that is because the people who are at the executive level, sometimes they don't even know what user experience is. Even in 2014, they don't know what user experience is. And so their focus is on the bottom line, shareholder return on investment, and so on. And so you have to make it a win-win for both. And it's I have a client right now who's their distributor. So it's kind of like an Amazon, really. No stores. You go to the website and you buy from the website. And so it's your content is your business asset. That's your virtual product. Nobody's going to find out about the real product in your warehouses unless they can find that compelling content on your site. And that changes the whole conversation about user experience versus sales, because if you do this well, that will follow, right? So you need to reframe the conversations. And I think we're done because Adam's coming up to rescue me. Thank you.